All right, let's start with Greenline, which is finally up. Thank God, because both of us were, it's stressful.
We didn't have a whole lot of sleep over the last little bit here.
But it is up there, so you want to go check it out. It's pff.com/Greenline. I believe if you go to pff.com, you'll be able to see it. And it's obviously aimed at people that are interested in gambling and wagering and whatever you want to call it on football, whether it be NFL or NCAA. We have all NCAA FBS games up there. But what I think is really cool about it is that even if I'm just a fan that loves football, there is a lot of interesting components to this page, because when we built this tool, right, the foundation of it is we want to learn more about all of the different facets of football. And that spins itself into like, well, okay, who's going to win the game and by how much and all that stuff. Are you like me? Maybe you're a little less, what's the right word? Diversified in the way that you like Greenline, but that to me is my favorite.
No, I 100% think so. I mean, like if you're not interested in gambling, but you want to go in and look and see, what is the chance that Kansas City wins against Jacksonville in week 1, you can go see that, right? And if you want to say, what is this going to be a high scoring game? Is it going to be a low scoring game? If you're a fantasy player and you're interested, for example, there was, research I think a couple of years ago that said it's not the highest scoring games that yield the biggest edge in fantasy. It's the games that go over the total, no matter what the total is. So if you want to go through and say, okay, well, what's PFF's opinion on this stuff in terms of like, do they think this game's going to go under? Do they think this game's going to go over? Or even, the spread and everything like that. And the thing about it is unlike, and this is, something we had last year, but we don't have this year. It's not a picks. It's not a picks product. You're going in and you're saying, I want to see, what side PFF's on, what are the percentages, and then there's a little bit of information. Now, we certainly can't, we can't please everybody in terms of like, okay, my book has -117. What's that? This book's -122 or whatever. But, we do have a little bit of tool tips in there for, okay, if it's, standard -110 juice, what's the break even probability? Is this a break even bet? All that kind of stuff. So go in and look and have some fun with it. And, it'll be one of the engines that we use to sort of drive some of our content here, not only for NFL, but as you said, also college football.
Well, if I'm strictly someone that wants to do more sports betting, and I think there should be a lot of people out there that are doing that because it's now easier and it's less shady now that it's being legalized. The NCAA would be, I think, where I'd start, because there's just, the NFL is such an efficient market. There is so much news. Everything is known. And so it's really hard to find value at the NFL level. But the NCAA level, there is a lot more. And if you're, regional, there's a regional component to it too, which I think is really interesting. But we're doing, actually, you have just recorded 2 how-to videos for Greenline. So you go check those out on YouTube, and Eric and his dulcet tones.
My dulcet tones.
Are going to walk you through all the different things that you just kind of talked about. The fact that we have cover probs on there, the tool tips, all the different rankings and components of team play that are important. I've already watched them like 4 or 5 times. Well,
and we'll still have the picks column that we had every single week. The last 2 years, those picks have been 53.5% the last 2 years, something like that. So, we had not as good of a year in 2018 as we had in 2017. So it all sort of shook out that way. But we will do that. What's that?
We've cut 15 pounds of fat,
and we'll rebound
this summer. Gained 15 pounds of muscle.
Yeah,
we're ready to go.
And also Ben Brown and I believe I'll be making appearances doing college spread picks. I believe Ben's first article was just up about the week 0 games. Not a lot in the way of options this week. Just 2 games, and we're basically on the market number in both of those games. But he did a good job of writing up some of the angles there for you if you want to play DFS in college, or you want to bet the game, see what side to lean and everything like that. That's up on pff.com.
Yeah, you really know how to get me going. Start talking about college. Can't wait. Is Tate Martell starting this weekend?
He is not.
He's going to be on Instagram, though. He
is going to be on Instagram. Did he report back to his team? I don't even know.
He's going to be snooping. That's just hilarious to me. All right, PFF Greenline, you need an elite subscription, but the cool thing is that it's not more. Like, you want an elite subscription anyways, and then you get Greenline too, which is a ridiculous value.
Well, and I think that's important to note. It is a part of the PFF subscription. It is not an
add-on.
Exactly.
You're not over here. You don't have to feel slimy going and like buying picks from a random dude in a hat that's pulled down on the street corner. This is I want to understand the game of football better. Addition to all of the other I want to understand the game of football better content that's a part of PFF Elite, and it's something that we've worked really hard on. We're really proud of, so go check it out.
Tate Martell with the wide receivers in practice, just to.
Oh man! All right, we're gonna do a little division by division preview for the season as we get closer. We're just a couple of weeks away. As I mentioned, Ross Tucker is coming up after this segment, and there's a special Cincy Y segment with Ross on there that you don't want to miss. Let's switch to the AFC, the West and the South. We did the NFC West and South last week, and we have articles that you can go check out on pff.com on each of the divisions. You, being a Chiefs fan, as you're wearing the Chiefs colors right now, nice ketchup colored red shirt. Derwin James. He is no longer a member of the starting defense for the Los Angeles Chargers, and all of a sudden you start to see some of the Chargerian things that happen every single year start happening to the Chargers, and it seems like every year there's this group of people. Mike Renner has been a part of this group that gets really excited about the Chargers. They have as much talent as any team in the NFL, yada yada yada, so on and so forth. They're my Super Bowl pick. And then right about this time, you start to go, well, Andy Reid, he's still the coach in Kansas City. I know their defense was bad, but that means it can't be worse. So now I'm starting to lean very heavily towards the Chiefs once again.
Yeah, and probably not as much as, when Monday Night Football was on, Tess and Boog, the ESPN FBI had the Chiefs winning that division 66% of the time, which I think is egregiously high.
That is a little high.
But, we had them more around 59, 60%, and I think that's more reasonable and in line with what the betting markets have. Mm-hmm. But it still felt high to me, so I went in and dug in to say, why is this happening? And I think the key thing is Kansas City is a West Coast, or plays in a West Coast division, but has Central Time Zone as its home, and the Chargers and the Chiefs do not play in California this year.
True.
So when the tiebreakers come into play, like Kansas City just has a way better chance of sweeping the Chargers than Los Angeles does of sweeping Kansas City. So, they are a decided favorite in my opinion. They have the younger quarterback. We might see some regression there, but as you said, their defense was one of the worst in the NFL last season. And, even though I don't think they sufficiently addressed everything, they probably will improve just by, regression, reversion to the mean.
Well, I think Mahomes probably regresses statistically. I don't necessarily think that means he plays a ton worse. I mean, he did a lot of stable things really, really well, and they're stable for a reason. Like, I don't expect him to all of a sudden come out and start airmailing open receivers 10 yards away. Right? I would expect some of the out-of-the-pocket stuff to maybe decline a little bit, some of the crazy pressure stuff. But those are the minority of plays, which gets me to why I'm actually a little nervous about the Chargers, and that's that Phillip Rivers, he's not very mobile. And that Patriots game where they just got shellacked, I thought it exposed their offensive line a little bit, and Phillip Rivers made up for it earlier in the season. He was one of the top quarterbacks in passer rating under pressure pretty much like throughout the entire season. So he was kind of on the right side of variance there with stuff that we know is not stable. And in a situation that may require them, even though he already throws the ball as quickly as anyone in the NFL, where it's not an option, where he's just under pressure a lot.
Well, and last season, they had some stable things happen to them for once, right? Other than Hunter Henry getting hurt, right? Keenan Allen stayed healthy for one of the few times in his career. Mm-hmm. Mike Williams played well. Travis Benjamin was great, at times going over the top of the defense. The running back, he's been out so long, I forget his name. Melvin Gordon, he was hurt for a few games, but that didn't really matter because Austin Eckler's pretty good. The Chiefs, on the other hand, and again, back to your point of stability, the Chiefs dealt with a lot of instability last year, even on offense. Sammy Watkins missed a significant amount of the season. Their offensive line was injured for large portions at right, at center, right guard. Tyreek Hill was banged up with a heel injury at times, and then they had the Kareem Hunt. They literally cut their running back, three-fourths of the way through the season, and so. And all of that, their offense still, I think they scored over 27 points in every single game. So
you actually just mentioned the Kareem Hunt loss.
Well, what I'm saying is what I'm saying
by subtraction. Did you got in trouble again, or something else bubbled up?
Well, of course, but that's
Shocking.
the thing. So if they have league average stability offensively, that might even enhance Mahomes. As a
Major
player
League Baseball
this
is dealing with the same issue. Picking up gas station performance enhancement.
Didn't Blue Chews? Wasn't that an option at one point? Yeah.
What was I going to say? Lost my train of thought. Oh, no, the Chiefs are also interesting because on the defensive side of the ball, so the Chargers were a really good defense last year, and they didn't deal with any sort of massive injuries, right? Now this year, right from the get-go, Derwin James, who I think you could make a really solid case. I know Bosa's fantastic, and Casey Hayward as well. But if I had to take one of those guys, I'm probably taking Derwin James. Has a screw bent in his foot, whereas the Chiefs, it was really interesting. Chris was bringing this up about how sometimes you just got to recognize your personnel, and they didn't have the guys to run that personnel at all, and yet they just
on purpose, by the way.
Right.
They got rid of Marcus Peters and,
Right. And now it's okay, well, at least we're taking stock of what we have, and we're not going to put ourselves in that position. And if you're the Chiefs defense, shouldn't your thought literally be just do everything we can to hold them under 30? You don't have to be this shut down, Jaguars, Bears of the past couple of years defense. You can be 23rd and win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, And you just have to do aggressive things defensively. You have to sack the quarterback a couple times. You have to get turnovers a couple times.
Sure.
You can bleed yardage, I feel like. But the fact of the matter is, and frankly, these teams that have great offenses behind them, I don't think leverage that as much, right? A team like that should be blitzing a lot more. They should be playing, man coverage and with robbers and things like that can force turnovers because they know that if they give up a touchdown, Mahomes is coming back over the top and scoring again. It's the teams I sort of think about the Bears, I think about the Vikings, the Jaguars here, whose defenses regress because they have to be uptight because their offenses are not good enough to to push them forward if they're behind 7-0. And so I don't think the Chiefs have that. And frankly, the Chargers don't either. So they can still, given especially how strong they are up front, they can pressure the quarterback. They can, be aggressive in coverage, and their offense will probably back them up.
Well, it flips the other way. If you have a defense that is subpar and you have a good offense, you should be going for every single fourth and short because, what does this extra 30 yards on this punt matter? Possession is going to be far more valuable to me over the long run. Those are obviously the two front runners. The Broncos and the Raiders both suck. However, I'm not nearly... So the Raiders, to me, maybe you'll disagree with this. I feel like the Raiders are potentially so far away. The Broncos, at least, if, let's say, Drew Lock was Josh Allen, there's some variant season where it's hey, all things kind of click together, and the Broncos could be a decent team. They get Vic Fangio. They have a ton of defensive playmakers. If variance breaks right for them in terms of injuries on the defensive side of the ball, you'd expect that defense to be a top 10-ish defense with the potential to be top 1. And on offense, it's not like they're totally void of playmakers, right? Emmanuel Sanders is a really good receiver. They drafted Noah Fant. They invested in Reisner. I don't think Flacco or Drew Lock are doing anything, but at least if they did, the rest of the team would be able to get them over the top, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, and Flacco has not been the type of quarterback that's you're bottoming out with 5, 6 wins type of player, right? He's a win you 7, win you 8, make you kind of disappointing with a good defense. That's kind of exactly what this, the Vegas has him at 7. We're a little bit above that, and I think again, getting to play Oakland twice. Getting the Chargers, they beat the Chargers last year. The reason the Chargers didn't end up winning that division, they beat them in LA. So I don't think that they're going to be a complete disaster. The question is again, like in the AFC, do they have a chance to make the playoffs? AFC North strong, right? AFC East and the AFC South, like they could go either way. I think it's more likely that those two divisions are weaker.
Right.
So there could be a third, playoff opportunity out of this division. And I don't see Denver as out of the conversation with that. I think we have them about 22% chance to make the playoffs, which is a little bit above break even if you're betting them at plus 400. So,
there's a path, which is weird to say because their quarterback position has been
a disaster,
an atrocity.
Yeah, they go 9-7
bad.
with Trevor Siemian one year. I mean,
they won a Super Bowl with Peyton Manning playing with his left arm.
Right, he was dead at that point.
And Brock Osweiler.
Yeah.
But the Raiders are worrisome because they go out and spend $2 million on a $10,000 car in the draft. They're trotting all those guys out there. Josh Jacobs is going to make so many people on fantasy squads everywhere excited.
Yeah,
and
Trent Brown's going to bring the illusion of stability on the offensive line. Derek Carr is Derek Carr, and the defense is like I'm not exactly sure who's going to cover anybody.
You and me. And then Antonio Brown, I was trying to be on the other side of this for a while, which was like, hey, people saying that he's crazy and doing all this weird stuff. They're just, they just want to make up a story.
Yeah.
They don't like people that talk about themselves on Instagram, all of this stuff. I've got to admit, some of this foot, the feet and helmet thing, it's weird, dude. It's really weird.
And we've seen somebody brought up Terrell Owens, and I think honestly, Antonio Brown and Terrell Owens historically are pretty similar in terms of how good they are.
This is a great comparison.
And Terrell and the Eagles wanted to. They tried their hardest to put up with it, and ultimately, even that they cracked, and they had a terrible season that in 2005 with Owens. They had to let him go after 7 games, and it was sort of this crazy thing, and then eventually T.O. sort of got into this stable thing where he wasn't as brilliant as before, but his antics were sort of in place. I wonder if Brown settles into that or if it's just the end for him.
Here's the thing. Winning is a
T.O. with Buffalo, for
winning
example.
is a cure-all.
And they're not winning.
And they're not winning. And then, so it's a what came first, the chicken or the egg thing, but culture matters in these situations for 2 reasons. If you're good at creating, you're showing me pictures of T.O. in a Bills uniform. If you're good at creating a strong culture, then there's a pretty good chance that you're not bringing in people that are cancers to your team, first off. Secondly, when you do take on people that may have a bad, connotation around them, it's because you've vetted them, that a little bit is misunderstood, and you have a winning tradition and culture that they were bringing them into.
Right, you lack desperation, right? Desperation is the first step to ruin, right? I mean, the Patriots are never desperate enough for a player to compromise their culture to acquire them.
Right.
The Raiders
just be like, hey, I'm not wearing this helmet. Screw you.
Right. They'll cut. I mean, they cut Hainsworth after just a few games because he was trash and they had Ocho Cinco on their team and he couldn't learn the playbook, so they didn't play him. They're the lack of desperation, whereas the Raiders do seem desperate to get good players on their team, and as a result, there's always this chance of ruin, and we're seeing that.
Not
currently.
that desperate. Did you watch the first round of the NFL draft?
That's true. Yeah. What about T.O. Bengals though?
Yeah, this is pretty fire. He looks great in that uniform. They could maybe use him week 1.
Yeah.
The AFC South just wrote an article about them this week. I am going to go out on a limb and say least exciting division in the NFL. Your thoughts?
Yeah. This division, the problem is The Colts are starting to get interesting because there are these creeping suspicions that Andrew Luck is not ready for the season.
Yep.
Let's throw that to.
I feel like I've heard that before.
Let's throw that caution to the wind for a second and assume he's going to be healthy week 1.
Okay.
If he's healthy week 1, I think the Colts are firmly the favorite in that division in a very boring way.
Yep.
They don't have any dysfunction. They're run well. Their offensive line's good. They have a brilliant receiver. They have a running back by committee, right? So they're not overspending for running back. Their defense isn't terribly talented, but they added Justin Houston.
Not dumb.
And they're not dumb. They do smart things. As you said, they play to their strengths. So that team is the favorite in a boring way. Houston's kind of funny because they don't have a GM. They absolutely don't have an offensive line. They tried, but like in the draft, it was a disaster as well. They have Matt Khalil left tackle.
That's so bad.
They have a really good wide receiver and quarterback combination.
Just get jumped for like one of the best left tackles. Take you.
They're one of their best defensive players is holding out with no end in sight. So there is some intrigue there.
But yet, if Andrew Luck is not playing, they have the two most valuable players in that division, bar none.
And Jacksonville should be a team that emerges again this year. But it's always Nick Foles. You just never know. And then Tennessee is literally the boringest team in the NFL.
They're so bad.
They're just like there's nothing exciting about Tennessee.
They're on Sunday night this week, and
you making the preview packet for that is just like just trying to leaving 5 pages blank. I imagine.
I mean, it's basically Mariota's bad, and the rest of the team is boring, and that's. They're
the most boring team in the NFL.
They're so boring. And it's sad because Nashville is actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then they've got this team that's like the total antithesis of what they've got going on there. So you kind of throw them out. Jacksonville, they were so bad offensively last year. It was crazy. I was looking at play action, yards per play. So the Patriots, Chiefs, Niners, Chargers, I think, were up there. Seahawks were up there in terms of yards per play off of play action. Not surprising that they were up there. The Raiders were 31st, like 5.7 yards per play.
Why wouldn't they be?
Action. The top teams are about 9, a little over 9. The Jaguars were like 4.26. Dude, they were halfway to the Nick Mullins Niners in terms of play action efficiency, which is something that, like, hey, you don't have a great quarterback. You don't have a great offensive line. You should still be able to like manufacture some stuff off play action.
But that's sort of like the shtick about play action is that. So there's a couple things. Play action makes every quarterback better usually, but it's not stable for that particular quarterback year to year.
Right.
And so there's a sign to say, okay, every team should run play action more. I buy it. And then there's also, we should still lean into this trash quarterback because we can run play action every time, right. Which the data would say, no, actually not. You should actually get yourself a competent quarterback and then use play action to enhance him. Don't rely on play action as a crutch to elevate a crappy quarterback. And that's the thing that Jacksonville ran into last year.
Yeah, it was shocking. No one could have seen it coming.
No, none.
No one. Not even the two people here. You remember that? There's some Jaguars YouTube commenter that just went off on us.
Yeah. You guys never like us. Oh, really? We don't like your receiving core, whose best player, Marquise Lee, is out? Dante Moncrief.
We don't like Blake. I like Blake Bortles as a person. Do not like him.
He seems like a decent concept, as a guy.
Yeah. So, in general, this division to me is monumentally boring. I don't know what the Houston Texans' plan is in terms of Deshaun Watson. Are they just hoping that he survives? There were games last year, the Cowboys game in particular, which was also a really boring game. He was just getting the crap beat out of him. And it seems like that happens a lot. That would worry me a ton. But then again, if Andrew Luck can't play, Jacoby Brissett is...
He's okay.
Sure. But like you're now the favorite to win that division. That might,
but I don't actually think that that's true. I don't think they're a decided favorite, and that's why we've said we like the Tennessee under. We printed that early in the year, but I think Tennessee at like plus whatever they are, 400 to make the playoffs. I think 600 to win the division. 600 to win the division. Like if chaos ensues in the AFC South, it's going to be a boring ass team like Tennessee that's going to win it.
They have to bleed.
Whereas I just think Houston was on the right side of variance so much last year. Bad offensive line, quarterback, was the highest rated guy, quarterback rating under pressure. DeAndre Hopkins didn't drop any passes, which I know is skill probably for him, but will regress likely at times. Defensively, one of your best defenders is gone. You got by with some older players in the secondary last year. I think Houston, and we bet the Houston under last year. That was ended up being a mistake even after they started 0-3. I think if this division becomes a free-for-all, it's teams like Jacksonville and Tennessee that are the better bets.
I am such a big Deshaun Watson fan.
Same.
It is really hard for me, given that the other two teams, the Titans and the Jaguars, have gaping, massive holes in many parts of their more TOs. In many parts of their team that are important, it's hard for me not to take maybe the best quarterback wide receiver duo
In the NFL?
So now that
Brown and Big Ben.
So I think Mayfield and OBJ have a chance.
Thomas and Breeze.
I think the reigning ones are what? Breeze, Thomas, and Ryan, Julio. But they're in the top 5, I think. For sure in the top 5. Be more definitive. Anything else about this division that interests you? I have nothing.
Teams who root people who root for teams in the AFC West, AFC East, and AFC North should be thanking God about the AFC South.
That's a good point. What do you think happens with Luck?
Oh, I think he plays week 1.
You do.
And I think it's one of those where it's. I hate to typecast them, but he strikes me as a Big Ben, where he's gonna wrap that pitch up into like a big air cast, and he's just gonna stand in the pocket.
Saint Andrew Luck in the same bathroom as Ben Roethlisberger. Do not do that.
Are we just gonna end the podcast on that?
Yeah, that's terrible. I think he misses. If he plays week 1, it's the same thing that they did with him last year, where he comes out there and just dinks and dunks it around. They can't be this obsequious about this injury and it not be something, in my humble opinion.
Okay, okay, that's where we disagree, but we'll run the Sims tonight with the with Brissett playing like a month. Let's do that.
So excited. Got Ross Tucker coming up. Before we do get there, I want to remind you guys that the season is coming up. You might be a fantasy player, you might be a casual fan, might be a DFS player, whatever it is that you do. But if you have not tried the Las Vegas Super Contest, you should. And we've been doing it for a while now. It's a ton of fun. Get in with a couple of buddies. Maybe you have a group of friends you always talk football with. This is a great way to kind of bring yourselves together. It's a fairly decent buy-in, $1,500, but the payouts are obviously big. It forces commitment. And you get to go to Vegas because you got to go there to sign up. And if you live outside of the state, you're not going to go put your picks in every week. You need a proxy service to go do that for you. Footballcontest.com. Is the place to go. We've used them multiple times. They're super professional. They make it really easy. Footballcontest.com is what you want to go to if you're going to join the Las Vegas Super Contest, which I think you should because it's a lot of fun. And if you have questions about it, you can hit either of us up. Ross Tucker coming up next. On the line now, the one and only Ross Tucker. Ross, how are you doing, man?
George, I am fantastic. I am ready to go, fired up. I was happy to have you on the Even Money podcast earlier this week. We're doing the old home and home.
No, so that was a great time. We had a blast. Now, I should mention that on that pod, and I think I told you this, Eric, I was dealing with adverse circumstances, an echo coming on my end, but I powered through, didn't I, Ross?
What's the preseason for? The preseason is for testing players when they are under adverse situations and seeing how they respond. So par for the course.
And Ross, you'd say I did okay, right? Managed.
I thought you did fantastic. Everybody listening needs to listen to George's performance with a bad echo. Now, you couldn't, the listeners couldn't hear it, but George was dealing with it. 2 thoughts there, George. Number one, as a frequent broadcaster, we always say that that's kind of how you separate the men from the boys, right? Is how you perform when it's adverse circumstances, and I could give you a million stories, but there's a lot. And number two, I still am convinced that was on your end. So I don't feel bad for you at all.
Look, I will blame the internet in my apartment building. How about that? Let's get it started with this. We always try to bring a couple of non-football questions to the table, and I'm bullish on your answers to some of these. I think they'll be fun. So the first one I want to start with is, what's the worst place you've ever lived?
Ooh, I'm going to go with Cleveland, Ohio. So I grew up outside of Pennsylvania, outside of Philly in Pennsylvania.
Uh-huh.
I love my hometown. I've lived in Princeton, New Jersey for college. I've lived in Washington, D.C., really Northern Virginia for the Redskins, Dallas for the Cowboys, Buffalo for the Bills, Cleveland for the Browns, actually Cumberland, Rhode Island, and Foxborough for the Patriots. And then spent some time in New York City with my wife, and then even Chicago when my wife got her MBA. I would say Cleveland. Now, in fairness, I was only there for a month. I was only there for a month, and it didn't end well. They traded a conditional 7th-round pick for me. I started the last 3 preseason games. I thought I'd start the opener, and then I got cut. So I might be skewed just by, bad memories of what happened, and that's certainly possible. But I would just say this. I would say, there weren't that many redeeming qualities. I don't really like Chicago. You're right on the water. Lake Michigan, it's awesome. Even Buffalo, you're not far from skiing. Like at Ellicottville or, Holiday Valley, you've got actually some cool stuff on the water there, and Niagara Falls. Cleveland, I feel like, like Wayne and Garth in Wayne's World when they're in Delaware. They're just like, all right, we're in Cleveland. Okay. So I don't, there was nothing really negative about it, but I can't really think of anything positive either.
Ross, you're preaching to the converted here with George, because his opinion of Ohio is I think like very congruent to yours.
I would agree. So you hit the nail on the head, which is there are all those pros about all of those other places, and you got to dig real deep to find some pros about Cleveland and Cincy. I think it may be like a slight cut above, but I'm
it definitely is. I've spent a bunch of time in Cincy. Cincy's definitely better than Cleveland. There's no question.
Okay. That as someone that will never be going to Cleveland, that sounds right. Okay, next one is what is your favorite cocktail or beverage of choice?
Well, unless we count milkshakes, because if it's like extra thick chocolate or cookies and cream milkshake, like I'm all over that. If we're talking more adult beverages, no matter where I am, what I order is a local IPA. That's what I order. So living in central Pennsylvania in the Harrisburg, Hershey area, I like Nimble Giant and Field Study from Trogs, which is in Hershey.
Okay.
Those are 2. One's a double IPA, one's a regular IPA. They're absolutely delicious. My buddy Al has Pizza Boy Brewing, Al's of Hampton, and he's got a 10.5% double IPA.
Wow. Front
side, lip side, which is a real nice drink 1 beer of those and you're good to go.
You spit out more beer terminology in that one little clip than I've heard in my lifetime. That was impressive. You might want to consider having adding another podcast to the list, man.
I really like football, IPAs, and food, other than like my family and wife. But football, IPAs, and food, those are like my 3 things.
Yeah, we're not too dissimilar, us 3. And by the way, I'm allowing milkshakes because I love milkshakes. They're tough though because you've got to commit when you're going to get a milkshake.
Yeah.
But okay, so let's jump into some of the NFL stuff. And every year, preseason, I'm sure you feel similarly, is like this amazing, for lack of a better word, orgasm over all of the great things that are happening to your team. And there's really not a lot of negatives unless you're the Niners and Jimmy G's thrown 10 straight interceptions. But everyone is usually looking at different parts of their team, and it usually seems like it's skill position guys. You have a unique ability to kind of take a look at some of the things that are often not appreciated enough, like offensive line. So as you're looking around the league now, before the season has started, who are some of those lines that are causing you to think differently about teams out there?
Yeah, I would say one for sure is the Cleveland Browns. I obviously already had concerns about the left tackle spot and Greg Robinson, even though he did pretty well down the stretch last year. He has been consistently inconsistent in his career. And so I just can't expect that to definitely change. But they've got even two bigger issues in my mind. When they traded Kevin Zeitler to the Giants as part of the Odell Beckham Jr. trade, the thought process was that Austin Corbett, who was the number 33 overall pick the year before, would just slide in there, be the right guard, no problem. Well, hasn't happened. In fact, he's nowhere to be found right now. And instead, a career journeyman, Eric Kush, is starting at right guard. And almost as troubling, guys, is they have no depth. I mean, you look at their guys, I guess it's Brian Witzman would be the next guy in, or maybe Corbett. I tell people all the time, you got to count on your 6 offensive linemen to start half the year, just the way injuries go. So the Browns do not have a championship caliber right guard, left tackle, or depth, and O-line is not a position that you want to be light on. So, that's one reason why I'm not as high on the Browns as everybody else seems to be. I guess conversely, I'll just stay in the AFC East, and I really like the Bills and the Jets, the amount of resources they put. I mean, the Bills signed 7 free agent offensive linemen who have all played and are all at least serviceable to try to give them a good starting 5 plus depth, and they drafted Cody Ford in the second round. And then the Jets, even just during camp, found a way to get Alex Lewis and Ryan Khalil. So I would expect both of them to be a lot better up front.
Well, you bring up a point that I think we've tried to make here, which is, the offensive linemen who are elite, right? They're really fun to watch, right? Tyron Smith, stonewalling defensive linemen for years, even Trent Williams in Washington. But
you do not forget David Bakhtiari.
That's true. Yeah, and he's great too. But like there's really a lot of value in the fact that the difference between like a really bad offensive lineman and an average one is far bigger than an average one and a truly great one in terms of outcomes, right? And so you bring up some great points in that, like the teams that are going to struggle because of their offensive line is not necessarily the lack of elite talent there; it's the lack of depth or the probability that they'll go in with a weakness that another team can exploit play after play. And I do agree with you. I think in the AFC North, I think, the Steelers are an underdog relative to the Browns in terms of winning that division, but their offensive line is so much superior. And, at the quarterback position, there's so much more proven that I think they're probably a better bet than Cleveland than people think.
1,000%. I've been telling everybody I got Pittsburgh in that division. I actually think Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Cleveland are all probably between like 8 and 10 wins. Yeah. But I'm taking Pittsburgh because of the O-line, because of the experience that Tomlin and Roethlisberger have in those close late games in the season, as opposed to Freddie Kitchens and Baker Mayfield, or even Lamar Jackson for that matter, although he played late in the year last year. For all those reasons, I really like the Pittsburgh Steelers in that division. Plus, the Browns just talk too much, and they don't know what it's like to be the hunted rather than the hunter. I actually think the Browns might be in for a pretty big wake-up call, and the offensive line is not the only reason why.
Well, and they're still dealing with the curse of Ross Tucker, right? I mean, they haven't really been the favorite in the AFC North since they let you go. So
that's 1,000% correct. By the way, they traded a conditional 7th-round pick for me. So I don't know if you guys knew, but that's the highest honor you can bestow on a pro football player, to be traded for a conditional 7th-round pick. And the Patriots are still mad at me because they traded for Hank Fraley and cut me, and the Patriots didn't even get the 7th-round pick out of it. They didn't even get – I'm the conditional 7th-round pick that the condition didn't even happen. They didn't even get it.
Oh, man.
I mean, I'd tack 10 more years onto that curse then if I'm the football god then to Cleveland.
Yeah, you need to make that a thing, especially after the way that you talked about Cleveland about 10 minutes ago. I would say that right now you just have to go full into it. You have no choice.
Do me a favor and make sure, I don't know how you guys geo-target or whatever, make sure this podcast is not available in Northeast Ohio. Thank you.
Usually my or both our faces just get thrown into Chicago after we talk about Mitch Trubisky, and they throw rocks and fruit at us. But Cleveland generally is interesting because we are such big Baker Mayfield fans, and that's I think a reason why the offensive line is an issue, right? Because he's your biggest advantage
right.
when you trot them out there. But usually we have good things to say about the Browns because we're always talking about Baker. So it's nice that we finally delve into another side of their team, because I think about some of the teams that always have, it feels like, depth on the offensive line, and two that really come to mind are the Eagles in that Super Bowl winning year where, I mean, they lost Jason Peters, right? And they're able to plug and play and get guys to perform at least an average level, and that allows them to then take advantage of their playmakers and go all the way to the Super Bowl. And then the Saints, not so much last year, but a couple years ago, it felt like they were always kind of had one guy that was out, Teron Armstead's out, and they're shifting guys around.
Yep.
But because all those guys are competent, it's not destroying their most valuable asset in Drew Brees.
Well, and their quarterback knows how to. I mean, it's got to be comforting as an offensive lineman to know that your quarterback, you have his back and he has your back, in the sense that it almost never looks like the New Orleans Saints offensive line looks bad, because Drew Brees is always putting them in a position to succeed, and they're putting him in a position to succeed as a result. So, those are interesting examples.
Yeah, Ross, what's your thought on that, about how you feel as a lineman with the quarterback and just like his kind of trait, right? He's going to hold on to the ball, or he's going to always get the ball out as the play calls for.
Every offensive lineman would tell you that their dream quarterback is a guy like Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
Or Brady, a guy that gets rid of the ball very quickly. Because people say, well, what about a mobile quarterback? Well, here's the thing. If your guy beats you and Michael Vick or whoever makes that guy miss and makes a big play, you still get yelled at.
Yeah.
Like, you still got beat. You still get yelled at. Whereas so many offensive linemen got paid for the Colts and the Patriots over the years because Brady and Manning get rid of the ball so quickly. I used to watch and be like, man, that would be nice. Just how quickly they were able to get the ball out of their hands. I'll say this, as we're talking, I'm driving right now to the Eagles-Ravens preseason game. I'm the color analyst for the Eagles, and their second offensive line is really impressive. Left to right, they have four guys that are legitimate, I think, starters in the NFL. I mean, the left tackle, Andre Dillard, first-round pick, has been a favorite of PFF. Mm-hmm. He's the only tackle with more than 37 pass rush reps that hasn't given up a pressure yet.
Look at you.
Yeah, dude, I'm all over PFF. He's extremely impressive. The center, Wisniewski, started I think over 100 games in the league at center or guard. And to your point, he was the left guard on the Super Bowl team. The right guard, Halapaludi Vaitai.
Nicely done. You're ready for this game, I can tell.
Yeah, he's been excellent. I mean, he's the guy that started at left tackle in the Super Bowl, but he's played very well at right guard. And then the right tackle, Jordan Mailata, the 22-year-old Australian, has been fantastic. He still needs to learn a little bit in terms of his football intelligence. It's his second year ever playing football, but he's a starter in the NFL at some point too. So they literally have a second string with 4 starters on it. I don't think you can say that about the left guard, Matt Pryor.
Yeah.
But I do think Matt Pryor is a guy that would be a good 6th or 7th man for a bunch of other teams in the league.
Well, and you know, we're talking oftentimes about sports betting and things like that. I mean, it's all about mitigating risk, right? And there's so many teams in the NFL right now that are an injury or two away on the offensive line, away from not being a functional offense. You sort of saw Minnesota last year, you know, some other teams in the past, you know, Houston, for example. And
Houston wasn't an injury away. They just were.
Yeah. And now, you know, you talk about the Eagles, like there's a lot of uncertainty associated with Carson Wentz injuries, right? But it's not going to stem from the fact that they haven't covered their bases up front. And that's a huge hack, I think, for them.
When you were mentioning the Peyton Manning, Tom Brady thing, Ross, I was thinking about, we've done some looking into like measuring player exertion. Anecdotally, even if like the number of plays are slightly fewer, you know, if you're running around and you have a guy that's going to hold onto the ball for 3 seconds instead of 2.2, that's got to make a pretty significant toll on how you are feeling wind-wise, you know, play to play, right?
Well, maybe, but the only thing I would say about that is rushing the passer, rushing the quarterback is way more tiring than pass protection.
But they're bringing guys in and out, though.
Well, that's why.
Right.
You know, that's why. So I don't think that makes that much of a difference. Okay. You know, I think it's more just knowing where the guy is going to be and knowing he's going to get it out quickly. And I'll add something else to that, specifically as it relates to Brady, which is his pocket movement, really both of them, but I was in New England. His pocket movement is so good that even if you get beat, as long as you stay on the guy, you're not going to end up giving up a sack because he'll just slide around the pocket. As long as you stay on him and keep running your feet. And the other point about mitigating risk, and I think that's why the Eagles signed Josh McCown. There are certain positions, and D-line, O-line, and quarterback are absolutely those for the Eagles, where they just refuse to take any chances. They refuse to ever be shorthanded at those spots.
No, that makes a ton of sense.
So Ross, what is one thing about offensive line play that somebody like you, who having played the game at a high level, at multiple positions too, knows that somebody, you know, who's just watching the game, like what is one thing that even somebody like, you know, us who has all the data, does the analytics, all that kind of stuff, what's something that we're likely missing that you are, privy to in terms of offensive line play?
How complex it is mentally, and that to be a starting caliber offensive lineman, you have to have a really high football IQ. And I would say it's the most mentally demanding position after quarterback, and especially if you're a center or a guard, because you're involved with all of the blitzes and things happen so quickly. It's really a different type of intelligence. It's not like, you know, taking the SATs or a test. It's how quickly you can adjust everything you were going to do in less than half a second, because they just moved the D line, and that changes everything while 80,000 people are screaming, and you're trying to not get run over by the 340-pound dude 6 inches from your nose.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think that something that interestingly about like some of football, some of the positions, you have to know your job, right? And like I think of like wide receiver, running back, positions like that. But like on the offensive line, you truly left to right need to know everybody's assignment left to right. And because of what you just said, whereas, you know, things that happen pre-snap just make the adjustments across the line, and it's not as simple as just saying, you know, block the guy in front of you. It's really, you know, this complex, you know, interweaving thing of things you guys have to think about.
Yeah, you really need to see, to your point, the big picture. If you only see or study what you do, you're always going to be a little bit behind on the offensive line, because you're always working in concert with somebody, whether it's the guy to the left or the right of you.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because we have talked a lot about the value at different positions along the O-line, and one that sort of comes up that it's hard to tease out as much value as I think we believed to be there is center. And a guy that's coming back this year, hopefully, is Travis Frederick for the Cowboys. And we spoke about this a little bit, Ross, when I was talking about how I'm a little, bit down on the Cowboys. We're a little bit down on the Cowboys because of their skill position guys. But we do attribute their strength as a running team from a couple seasons ago to that offensive line. Travis Frederick coming back, is he the guy that has such a high mental acuity that he can transform not just him, but that whole O-line by being back there?
It helps a lot. That position has an immense responsibility on their shoulders. And I don't know how Looney, the guy last year, did, but I know Frederick's excellent.
Yeah.
And also, it's the depth of the pocket. And Frederick's the strongest center in the NFL, and it's also sort of the keystone or the fulcrum in the run game. And so I think he's an impact player from the center position, and it's mentally, and then it's his strength, both in the run and pass game that makes a big difference.
I mean, I'm going to go out a little bit on a limb here, I think, for most people, but to me, that is a far bigger loss/gain for the Cowboys than Zeke ever would be. Agree, disagree?
You know what? Probably. I haven't seen enough of Tony Pollard, the guy they keep hyping up, but I would say you're probably right.
He's a cross between Adrian Peterson and Walter Payton.
Let's just use Dallas running backs. Herschel Walker, Tony Dorsett, Emmitt Smith, and Zeke in one.
He's great. Cool. I want to get you out of here on this. We have a segment at the end of our pod about the Cincy YMCA and some of the crazy, weird things that we have seen there. And I want to give you an opportunity to vent a little bit about some of the crazy, weird, annoying things that you used to be, a professional athlete. You didn't have to deal with the plebeians at the 24-hour fitness, right? But now that you do, what have you seen?
Well, so I have like a home gym, so I normally work out there, but I do go to the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania YMCA.
Nice.
Because I like to swim.
Oh, so do we.
And so especially in the winter,
yeah.
As a former offensive lineman, I am trying to preserve my joints as long as I can. So swimming is just an unbelievable total body workout.
It's great.
Where you're not impacting the ground at all. A couple things at the Harrisburg YMCA that jump out to me. One is they only have like mini towels. So even after you shower, after your workout, you're working with 4 different mini towels to try to get everything dry. And I don't think that's very efficient for anybody. I don't know why they don't have any full-length, full-size towels. And the other thing is that's nice. They have a sauna and a steam room. And the only thing I don't love about it is every single time I've ever gone in the steam room, this one guy's in there. And this one guy is leaning back. He's got one leg up, and he is putting it all out there, and he is loving every minute of it. And I am generally uncomfortable in there, both because of his posture and because of the fact that I've never been there without him in the steam room. So there's something really bizarre there. So that would be mine.
That's great.
Man, those are fantastic. We started swimming actually this past season because that's something I'd always wanted to do and never had a pool. And the YMCA is great because they have a pool. I would say there are some disadvantages. It's probably not the nicest pool in the world, but it gets the job done. Ross, this was awesome. Hopefully This is just the first of many. Thanks for coming on. Knock 'em dead tonight at the game. I'm sure you will.
Yeah, make sure you guys watch. It's going to be replayed on NFL Network and obviously NFL Game Pass. You can watch it live. So thanks, guys. I'm looking forward to it. It should be fun. I hope a bunch of guys play. We'll see.
I anticipate greatness for a preseason game. Go out and check out all of the great stuff that Ross Tucker is putting out there. It is tremendous. You don't want to miss out. Ross, we'll see you later.
Thank you so much. Again, Ross Tucker Football Podcast. If you're into Fantasy Feast Podcast. And more importantly than anything, you got to listen to George on this week's Even Money Podcast.
Boom, man. We'll talk to you later.
Sounds great. See you guys.
All right, we want to thank Ross Tucker for coming on the show. It was awesome. He is a lot of fun. Had some really great takes about a YMCA in a different city, which we always love to hear.
They always relate.
I was surprised that you weren't. Actually, I bet you are, because you're much larger than I am. That the towels, they are kind of small.
I would say that, yeah, but there's a huge, like, I'm probably closer to Ross in terms of size, but I'm still like smaller, obviously, not having played left guard and center and right guard in the NFL. It was great. It was great to hear him talk about offensive line play in a smart way. He certainly, I think, understands the game of football very well, and he's absolutely right. I think offensive linemen really do have to understand the game to a level that people don't quite appreciate. So it's cool to talk about that.
Yeah, can I tell you what my favorite part about that interview was? So Ross Tucker's, he went to Princeton. He's an offensive lineman, educated guy, about to go call an Eagles game. But he managed to not talk about O-line play in a super douchey, uppity way. Which, you know, you got to appreciate that when that comes around. So thanks to him. Definitely go check out all the different pods that he's got going on. We forgot to ask him about his favorite Evan Silva story, but we will do that the next time that we get him on.
Right, because our Evan Silva stories are
Evan Silva.
The empty set is not
absolute legend. We got to get Evan on here too.
Yeah.
But he's busy, with that website thing.
Yeah.
Anyways, we'll see you guys next week. Enjoy preseason week 3. Peace out.